What's up, guys? How's it going? Welcome to Run and Gun episode 5 radio. Feel free to like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. Just going to be picking up on some general collective energies. 11:11 Make a Wish at the time of this recording. Spirit of gratitude, joy, love, and light, highest possible messages at this time for the creative collective of consciousness. Okay, 8 of Swords in the upright. 6 of Wands in the upright. There's this impending victory that you don't see coming. It's going to allow you to have more balance, more fiscal, financial balance in your life is how it's coming across. The 9 of Cup in the upright. This is that you are well qualified, credentialed, experienced here. And we'll just keep on telling the story that wants to come out here. The 5 of Wands in the upright. You had some conflict as of late in the recent past. Who hasn't? Queen of Swords, this is business acumen. This is sharp, quick-witted. This is finance, accounting, the maths, the sciences. It's the Queen of Wands here, someone who's well-versed, achieved, experienced, accomplished. You could be in a position where you offer value, you bring value to the equation, to the table. The 4 of Wands is union, okay, crossing a finish line as well. 3 of Wands in the upright. This is feeling bright and hopeful about the future, about what's to come. No longer having to fight with the 7 of Wands in the reverse. Emotional stability. I mean, traditionally, the 4 of Cups in the upright is not receptive emotionally, but I could understand this energy to speak more so to emotional stability. The 4 is about stability here. Let's see if we could get some correlation here with another deck here. Don't have to shuffle it too much. Okay, the 5 of Pentacles in the reverse, no longer being out in the cold. Okay, no longer struggling. Okay, you've come a long way. You fought a lot. This is on the double here, times 2. You know, cataclysmic change of events, sudden change, live in living color, in the flesh, in person. These are some of the phrases that are coming to mind here. The Sun in reverse, it's always a positive energy no matter which way it comes out here. To me, this is coming off as a payoff or a benefit for having gone your own way, having struck your own course. Being compensated here. And it could be at a time when you have, little to no faith left. Let's be honest. The King of Cup here in the reverse position. It's almost as if your jar is empty. You're running on empty here. The King of Cups in the reverse. You could be faced with negative emotion. The best advice that I would say is just get to the spot. Just get to the place that you need to be. That will allow you to achieve success. Sometimes it is just about going through the motions and making sure that you are just at the spot that you need to be. That will help you to achieve success. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you don't feel like it. Sometimes you don't feel like throwing on a blazer and a button up. Although you do look good. Yeah. Sometimes you don't want to be the boss today. Sometimes you don't want to be daddy. Sometimes you don't want to feed a family of 5. Sometimes you don't want to buy Birkin for your woman. Sometimes you don't want to put gasoline in the Lamborghini. Okay, this is daddy right here. This is King of Sword in the upright. You are able to get it together, in the midst of sadness, of not feeling it, being alone on your path. The Empress giving birth to the Hangman. Okay, cutting of ties. The world incomplete. To me, this says that, your period of suspension has, it's been proclamated, it's been prophesized, it's been purposefully done. It hasn't been for naught. Okay, there's a rhyme and a reason specifically for you to have been held up in this way. Yes, there's that competition again. There's the lovers, though. This is something divinely guided and ordained and blessed and bestowed upon you. Someone who's been out of partnership, out of a house of employment, could be out of literal housing. Okay, someone who's been in the position of not being that kind of superior authority in your own life. And yet you still have the Four of Wands here, which speaks to union and finality. The Three of Swords says that you're coming out of this sadness and sorrow. There is an offer here coming to you. Okay, despite the injustices, despite the flailing, someone is awfully concerned and worried about you, but you're coming out of this period of struggle here with the Three of Swords in reverse, from what I could see here. So good on you. Someone might be having to make a decision, but I feel as though that the decision will be in your favor. Okay, you might be the most well-coiffed and qualified here. It could be that you don't see it, you don't sense it, you don't feel it, but that's what's going to make it more sweet when it does come through here. Yep, celebratory, Three of Cups in the upright. After having been so long on your own, now you're able to kind of have this new start here. Okay, this new beginning with the World card here. So I'm happy for you. Exciting times to come. Don't throw in the towel just yet. Don't give in just yet. Good things are right around the corner. All right, guys, I'm going to go throw on some civilian clothes. I'm going to leave this up and running. If you want to text me for a reading or call me for a reading, my number's available in the description box. And I'll take live calls as always. Should they come in, I just want to get this heat-seeking missile of a jacket off before I melt. Yeah, they
It's an interesting question. And by the way, there are 7. Again, 7.
No, I can't. Come on, Greg. Oh, don't let us down. I'm going to kick this to Oz. You've got us, Dennis.
The vast majority of Jews could do it. They would, because one is very obscure level for our so Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, which is called the Day of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Passover, Pentecost, Shavuot, Tabernacles, Sukkot, and then the 7th, which is the one that trips up everybody, including most Jews, called Shmini Atzeret. So it's an old holiday. It's after the 7 days of Tabernacles is the 8th day. Shmini means 8th. Atzeret is convocation, meeting. It is the only holiday that has no purpose other than having a good time. It doesn't commemorate anything. It is a fascinating thing. So I don't work on Jewish holidays that are in the Torah. So I remember many of you know Larry Elder, who ran for governor in California, a dear friend of mine. So we used to be on the same station in Los Angeles, and I would be on in the afternoon, and he would follow me in his talk show. And so I said, so Larry, I just want you to know I won't be on tomorrow. And he goes, why? I said, I won't be on a broadcast on Jewish holidays. And he goes, which holiday is it? And I go, Shmini Atzeret. And the guy was convinced I made it up to take the day off.
Are you looking to dive deeper into the entire Bible? Look no further than the Hallow app, the #1 prayer app in the world, featuring an entire category of content to help you dive deeper into prayer and meditation on the Bible. By studying the Bible, you'll gain a deeper appreciation for the power of storytelling, symbolism, and metaphor, enriching your understanding of literature across different genres. Go through the Bible in a year with Father Mike Schmitz, or hear the Bible narrated by renowned actors like Jonathan Rubin from The Chosen, or Jim Caviezel from Sound of Freedom. Hallow has over 10,000 audio-guided prayers, meditations, and music to deepen your understanding and knowledge of the Bible. The Hallow app also helps you connect with a community of like-minded individuals, sharing experiences, insights, and encouragement along your path to spiritual growth. Download the app for free at hallow.com/exodus. You can set reminders and track your progress along the way. Enrich your education and nurture your mind and soul today. Download the Hallow app at hallow.com/exodus. That's hallow.com/exodus. Again, it's hallow.com/exodus for an exclusive 3-month free trial of all 10,000 plus prayers and meditations.
Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. And you shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and thy sons forever. It's a mark of proper sacrifice, mark of this sacrifice of the lamb, and that stops the power that destroyed Egypt from now and will continue to destroy Egypt from now, destroying the Israelites. And that's part of the foundation of the state of Israel. So, okay.
But it's in reverse, isn't it? I mean, also saying earlier that the sacrifice to commemorate and constitute the people of Israel and to remember the liberation of the people from Egypt happens before the event, as it were, before the liberating event. So liturgy and history are kind of sort of flipped around and a constant interwoven, as we'll see in the rest of the.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing too. You know, one of the things that Richard Eliot pointed out there was that the primary religious revelations of a society often occur prior to the establishment of the society. So, for example, the Egyptian religious revelations were established at the beginning of the Egyptian dynasty, and then it's almost as if they ran their course. You know, they had this intense motivational significance as animating stories. But that was there as a prodroma to the culture itself, and that was a derivation from it. And that has something to do with the power of the spirit of a newly revealed truth. And you say, well, what's a newly revealed truth? It's like, so that sounds just like religious language, but it's not. It strikes you with the force of a deep intuition. And so then you're motivated to integrate yourself around it. But not only that, if it's a really powerful revelatory idea and you share it with other people, they're drawn into that right away. They find it equally exciting, or they're equally filled with enthusiasm. And that's a real mystery that happens at the beginning of an enterprise in some sense. And I think that's partly what this marks is so. Because obviously the fact that this is what the Israelites should do to protect them from the ultimate avenging spirit of God, this is revelation. They're not thinking this up by themselves. And it's a surprising revelation.
It's partially how narrative contract works in stories, right? You have to introduce something in the first act, let's say a 3-act screenplay, to not have it feel like a Deus Ex Machina. So you can't have 2 acts and then have all of a sudden science fiction in the 3rd act. You have to have the language of any narrative has to be embodied in the opening in the 1st act. It's part of the narrative contract that you make. And so
Well, that's interesting. That's a reflection in some sense of the same idea that Jonathan had about memory, is that what you're doing right at the beginning of the story is you're actually establishing a contractual relationship about how the history of the characters is going to progress, and the reader accepts that contract. That's part of the suspension of disbelief. Then if you violate it, all you do is annoy your reader.
That's right, and part of it is what's fantastical or coincidental can happen in the 1st act, right? You can say, well, how is it possible that an undercover Navy SEAL happened to be on a hijacked airplane? And it's like, well, all the times it didn't happen, we didn't make a movie about it, right? It's fine to do in the 1st act, but if we're reliant on that to continue the narrative in the 3rd act, then it doesn't
Right,
really help.
then you don't have the story, you have the sequence of Deus Ex Machinas, and that's not the story at all. It's completely unmanageable.
Well, what happens with the story is you set the conditions in the place of the narrative contract, and then what happens, the best moments that we find in literature and film is when something happens and it's completely surprising and makes sense at the same time.
Yeah.
Right, there's these moments where there's a confluence, and part of that is
Well,
because
that's what happens in a joke.
right.
And that's what happens, especially a great joke, to make it aha, and it punches you.
And it's the rules of threes because you start to establish a pattern and then you invert it, but the pattern has to be
So
laid
what's that rule of threes?
in a joke.
Yeah,
Well, it's always right. It's
Yeah, I think you mentioned this the other day, that one is constant pattern, obviously, 2, again, coincidence, and then with the 3rd,
It's
then
a
the
pattern.
pattern kicks in.
and you reverse the pattern in a joke, right? So a narrative, you need all of the clay, the material that is the world building. Let's just say it has to exist at the beginning.
A comedian I had on my radio show told me what every joke must have, and it permanently stayed with me. And he was right. Surprise and a victim. Analyze any joke you know, and you will find that that is the case. Even if the victim is yourself, doesn't matter.
that's the best kind of joke.
The best,
That's
yes.
the English are particularly good at that. It's that self-delivery.
Self-delivery.
You bet, and that's
Is that true?
No, it's all.
Yeah. And it shall come to pass, when ye come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. So this is something you're doing for your fellow man and God in service. And it shall, so that's a feast in service of the Lord in the wilderness. And okay, and it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, what mean you by this service? That you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt. So that's what's being celebrated, is the fact that Israel is now permanently spared in some sense if they follow God's dictates from the destroying spirit who demolishes the tyranny. That's the part of the covenant idea. Is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed their head and worshipped. So they're humble in response to this salvation from the spirit of tyranny and the consequences of the spirit of tyranny. And the children of Israel went away.
Latest message, press 1. To leave, press 7. To stay, press 9. For more options, press 6. To replay this message, press 1. To leave.
Hi, I just received a call from someone in regards to a job opening. I think it was here. Yes, this is Peter Robbins. Hi, this is Peter Valdez. I just received a voicemail in regards to a job opening. I dialed. Let me look 1 second. Let me check my recents.
Hola.
Yeah, it's 818-855
Okay.
2555.
25. Interesting. Okay, is that the number that appeared on your caller ID
Yes.
when I called you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you left a different number, but from the
I did, but I just wanted to make sure because something happened because this is not my this number should not be appearing when I call you from this extension. But no worries. Thank you for calling me back, Peter.
Yeah, of course.
Give me 1 second. So
No, I'm on the job market right now, looking. Correct. Yes. Yes. I've been working for a couple different websites as a personal advisor. A while, yes. I was with them for a nice long time. From '07 to 2019. That is a public relations company. Career growth at the time. Chicago, and then relocated the position to Los Angeles in 2015, September. We used PeopleSoft, Oracle, also known as GFS. No, but I'm sure I could pick up on it rather quickly. Thank you.
The Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. There's another emphasis there, I would say, too, on this the distribution of the tyrannical spirit, right? Is that, and this just seems to me to be so accurate because we touched on this before, that in a totalitarian state, it's not top down, so it's not just the Pharaoh, it's that it, Totalitarian spirit is pride and deceit, and envy, something like that. It's distributed to the degree that the society is totalitarian. Everyone is participating in it all of the time. And so the consequences of that are visited on everyone from king to, even to the captive of the king.
Yeah, what do we make of that? That's just strange. That's what the
Well, the captive is, there's no one in this society who's less part of a society, but still a part of a society than someone who's in jail.
There's still complicity.
Yeah,
if you
yeah, right.
treated as a designated as an enemy of society.
Well, that is certainly
laws of society.
well, that was Solzhenitsyn's commentary on the gulags. He said he regarded himself as complicit, even though he was a victim. So,
But isn't the classical discussion there's a solidarity in guilt, right? Everyone, but there's also people under a bad regime caught in the neck in the way we don't, say, in a democracy, and both are right.
Yeah, I think even in the text of it, I think just like we saw when we talked about the Pharaoh and the woman behind the mill, I think that this is also an attempt to make us understand that this is a tremendous, terrible thing. We are also meant to have compassion for the Egyptians to a certain extent, because like, okay, the captain in the jail, okay, so this is terrible, this is terrible, it's the end of the world. Like, at the end of the world, everybody pays, and so there is a remnant which is taken out of this end. But we are not meant to just celebrate the terror that is, like you were saying about that, we're not meant to just celebrate the terror that is brought upon the Egyptians either.
Because at the end of anti-creation, it's got to be comprehensive, it's got to be critical.
Thank you. That'll be my new gesture, everybody will know what I mean.
and the Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead.
So here's what's amazing to me about this story, is that in conventional, not conventional, in contemporary story terms, this is exactly the wrong way that you would tell a story. All the information is given first, right? All the twists and turns. Then you're told that you're going to celebrate it. Then you're told how it'll go through the future. Then you're told what's going to happen. Then you're told all the ramifications. And then finally it says what happens. And so the telling of this is speaking to, it's not at a narrative cognitive level. It's literally establishing a story, talking straight to procedural memory.
Yeah, and it's also traditional storytelling is more to do with this procedural memory and this remembering. So think of the Iliad. We always think when we read the Iliad, people read the Iliad as a ritual event. They all knew it by heart. They knew so the manner which is told is rather this anticipation that we know what's going to happen. So it's actually a word of anticipation towards the story rather than constant surprise.
And it's saying, here's a story, make sure you encode it.
Yeah.
This is what the story's about.
Well, children do that They want to do that with many of the stories. They're
Fairy tales are mad at that.
They want
You
to
just repeat it over, you say it, and they're like, wait, what are you gonna say the same thing again?
Yeah, right.
They either say like, you know, when the wolf knocks at the door, it
So
says,
what is the reason? I'm fascinated that kids want to do it over and over. Why?
Well, I think partly because they haven't fully understood it, but partly because it's, so when I watched my son, he watched Pinocchio, especially the scene with the fire-breathing whale, which is basically a dragon, which is the climax scene of the entire movie. He probably watched that 50 times. He's thinking, what? That's not with you, kid, 50 times. Well, it's a really complicated idea to rescue your father from the belly of the dragon. It's like, it took a long time to get that. And I don't know if it's something like the translation from the purely representational down into the procedural. I think it's, and there's a reassurance in it too. It's like, well, I used to tell my kids when I took them to a scary movie, which was watch the hero. That's how you become not scared. This is scary. Just watch the hero. And then you show them the movie again, they're still scared, but the hero wins. And you show them the movie again, they're still scared, but the hero wins. And so they, especially if it's scary, they need to see it repeated to see that there's always triumph over catastrophe and evil as a real relief to them.
I want to emphasize something that is different from that and from the repetition, which is we don't start Hansel and Gretel by saying, we're going to have a story that's going to be a woman who's going to eat these kids. That's how that's going to end. Here's how we're going to celebrate it. Here's how you should discuss it. Here's what it's going to feel like.
this is more like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Or like the manner in which people who love Star Wars dress up and then will go see Star Wars again and again and again.
But again, Star Wars doesn't say at the beginning, here's everything that's going to happen. Right? So it's very interesting. This is ritualistic. This is speaking straight into procedural memory. It's saying encode this. It's establishing a mythology before the story even exists and proclaiming it.
So do you have some sense of why that's happening at a narrative level, or do you think it has to do with something different about how stories were used, 3,000 years ago?
This is particularly unique because that's the basis for how you if you want to establish a tradition with ritual, you lead with procedural memory. You're encoding it. It's not just like a thrilling story, right? And then you have fans who will want to see it and return to it. It doesn't work if you say to Star Wars, oh, by the way, right, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. Wait till you get there. Here's how we're going to celebrate it. There's going to be bar mitzvahs about this, right? It's like you don't establish all the structures of how a story is going to exist in society, and then you sit there while it's laid out before you. There's no element of suspense because it's not about suspense. It's not about holding your attention. It's not about holding your attention in the moment. It's about encoding the attention through your culture. And so it's got a completely different aim from a lot of
And that's why you think it gives them this different structure.
There's another side to that, though. I mean, of course, there's on the one hand, when you talk about hearing this children's story again and again, I mean, that's what ritual is. Like, there's never a life for any human being which you don't need that constant exposure to the deep things that remind you what you're about, or how to live, or whatever. So there's no getting over a ritual like this in human life. That's one of the points. But I think narratively, one of the things, there's a theological point being made here, which is that you can't. The Israelites, the departure or the liberation from the Egyptians, like they have to commend themselves to God. It's not like, oh, free us and then we'll trust you. It's like, no, there's a fundamental casting of the people in faith, you might say, in the goodness beyond themselves that they believe in. And it's not like you get it and then you're like, oh, okay, fine. Now, of course, there's been the miracles and so on and so forth in the book in the story up until now. But there's a profound sense here that what is going on with the Israelites is the contrast to Pharaoh, right? Like under no terms will you go, and the Israelites have to say, we will go under any terms, and we don't get the proof first. We have to cast ourselves on the principle in which we are living our life before we go.
If you're going to fight against tyranny, in some real sense, you have to fight against the tyranny before the tyranny disappears. And in order to fight against the tyranny, you have to evince faith that by appealing to the spirit that will lead you out of tyranny, that will work. And that's so preposterous. I mean, when someone like Solzhenitsyn says, one man who stops lying will bring down a tyranny, it's like, really? It's like, no, obviously not, but not so obviously not. And so the faith, and so this is another part of this foundational element in this story, is that as the Israelites do. He did faith in that which transcends tyranny as the foundation of their state, right?
Well, faith in God. I mean, I think this is the first time we see them as a, as a collective, as a nation. It's that striking verse, you took 27, verse 27, and the people bowed the head
Right.
and worshipped.
To this, that's right. They're
Right.
they're collectively pronouncing their allegiance to the spirit that's fighting against the tyranny of the Egyptians.
That's right. And then just one verse later, and it came to pass. So it's immediately precedes the sequence of events at midnight.
But it happened, it's very important that this first ritual happens in Egypt. I mean, they believe that God will liberate them, but they haven't been liberated yet, and so it's, you might say that the conditions for liberation.
Brought low yet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a precondition. Yeah. So that's that faith as a precondition for liberation. Well, I think that has to be true, because otherwise, why would anyone ever fight against the tyranny? So that's extremely interesting. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord, as ye have said. So even the Pharaoh now doesn't just say you're free. He says, you're no longer under the auspices of tyranny, but it's incumbent upon you to go serve the Lord.
It's ambiguous that, I mean, is he, as it were, conceding to the sovereignty of the Lord, or is it a kind of mocking, serve the Lord, as ye have said?
Well, I think he's at least conceding that the Israelites should do that.
Right, as you would do it, it's not yet a recognition of the God's sovereignty.
Well, if you took his character seriously, you'd probably use that interpretation. He's at least willing to admit that the Israelites should do this for sure. Yeah, because he doesn't go out into the desert with them. And also take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, although the best of them does go with them, which is so interesting. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. Well, there's some humility there. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we all be dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leaving their eating troughs, being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did, according to the word of Moses. And they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Well, that answers that question. So they lent unto them such things as they required. So the Hebrews aren't stealing this at this point. They're being given.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's symbolic of that transition from slaves to
the new masters.
to free people.
Yeah. And they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men.
This is one of the hardest things I encountered in writing my commentary, because I believe it's God's word, and I also believe that reason has to be used, so I call it the rational Bible. It's the Torah itself does not sustain the notion that there were 2 million people. It's the tradition among believers, and certainly Jews always say millions. Just to give one example, God says that the 7 nations in Canaan are all larger than the Israelites. So that would mean 14 million people in Canaan. It is inconceivable. Now, God can do anything, and many miracles possible, but I don't think the Torah meant that. So I never had a satisfactory answer. Am I right that I don't have a satisfactory answer? Doesn't negate my belief in the divine authorship or anything else, but I won't make up an answer if I don't have one. there is an answer that has satisfied me that I came across in doing the numbers, the fourth of the 5 books, which I'm working on now. And in a nutshell, if you want more, I'll bring in the writing. It is probable that this is an exaggeration by 10 times.
So you think it's metaphorical?
There's no question in my mind. That we use numbers with precision. Numbers in the Torah, look, it's very unlikely that it's coincidental. 40 days of flood, 40 nights on Sinai, twice, 40 years in the desert. It means a divinely important period of time. It doesn't mean the number after 39. So they found Middle Eastern evidence of 10 times the amounts that were really there to intimidate foes and to encourage the people. Look at how numerous. I mean, will we be as numerous as the stars in the sky? There are trillions of stars in the sky. Was it meant literally? So I think that's important because I want to sustain reason and faith.
We can certainly perfectly be willing and should be willing to note that in all our books of fiction and representation, we use metaphor, poetry, and image to make points, and that doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that it's no. That's a whole. It's true. True is complicated.
I think we're invited to see it as kind of as typological, really, as kind of anticipating. Well, first, it's a crazy high number.
Right. That's the point.
And so maybe it's saying that
How would he speak? It says he spoke to the whole congregation of Israel. He spoke to 2 million people. You can't do that with microphones.
right, yeah. But so it could be a one to design of the Egyptians prospered in Egypt. They multiplied over the 400 years that they were in bondage. It's rhetorical. I think also 600 chariots on there. Doesn't Pharaoh have 600 chariots? Later on, so that's we're invited to draw a counterpoint between the two.
Numbers have
I think it
to do with
magic. It also has to do with 6. I think that because it's a new creation and it's at least multiple of 6, that it's.
Hi, this is Dylan.
Good afternoon, Dylan. Aloha. This is Daniel. Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Okay, what can I help you with? Okay. Yeah. Let me see if anything in particular wants to come out with the energies that I'm looking at here. Yeah, the world card is your dominant energy coming out here, and this is very much so about completion and moving forward, moving onward. the wrapping up of cycles and chapters and moving into a next phase in your story, in your life. So this would be a big new beginning. I would imagine somehow, some way, Three of Pentacles coming out here after this energy, that could refer to housing or a house of employment as well. And so I can imagine that this is in reference to, possibly, seeking other accommodations where you would be staying. Hopefully you could find something sooner rather than later. Yeah. But the King of Pentacle energy here that just came out, this speaks to stability, physical, structural, even in regards to resources and finances, stability. So I don't see you having too much of an issue moving forward, either finding another place to stay or some sort of income or resource stability, as opposed to like a wandering in the desert type energy, which, thankfully we don't see here. Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to keep on looking into this, or was there anything else that you wanted to? Okay. All right. Well, God bless, and feel free to reach out anytime. All right. Bye-bye.
It's trying to help us understand that it is related to kind of the new man or new creation of man.
They will be.
Yeah, well, numbers, you don't understand how magic numbers work to people who aren't literate. They're still magic, but they're really magic to people who aren't literate, just like words are, especially written words. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, that were men, beside children, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, who flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And they made unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, right, because we're in a hurry, and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. So that's interesting too. There's another act of faith, right? It's like they've got some treasure, and that's great, but they don't have a lot to eat, and they're going out to a desert. And one of the things we want to note here, I think that's really important, is that, so I've thought about this for so long, is why do people, it's so core to Exodus, why do people cling to their tyrannical catastrophe, even the one they impose on themselves? And the answer is because it's out of the tyranny into the desert. And it isn't clear that the desert is better. Certainly it could be worse, because you can live in a tyranny in the desert. No, you can't die in a tyranny. But you have to be, and maybe to flee from a tyranny, you have to be ready to flee at a moment's notice, and you have to be willing to follow immediately what calls you out of the tyranny. And so,
The famous rabbi's remark, took the Lord one day to get Israel out of Egypt, and 40 years and counting to get Egypt out of Israel. And that's
right, and that's why it's again 40. The desert isn't very big geographically speaking, and you think, well, what's going on with these Israelites? 40 years to get across that desert, that's a long time, but it's another use of numbers in the same way, I would say, is that the point is it's 3 generations, it's a long time, and so don't be underestimating the dryness or the length of the post-tyranny desert, especially if you lose faith and orientation when you're in the desert, which is a high probability event.
Right. I've always thought about the Jewish emphasis on education. It's like it's the one thing you can take with you as you're driven from place to place.
That's right. Well, and a book, right, or a scroll, right, great. And there's a lot.
Your comment reminded me, you'll enjoy this. So this is not meant as a joke, by the way, but it is funny nevertheless. The rabbis ask, so what has God been doing since creation? It's a very fair question. And their answer is bringing couples together, which shows you how hard it is.
So there's also a little detail I think is important to understand. So we talked about how this is the foundation of Israel. Like this is the new beginning, the congregation, the bowing down, the participating in the sacrifice, the marking of the doors, and the sense in which Israel is marking itself as different, marking itself as together in order to be a remnant out of this end of the world scenario where Egypt is being destroyed. But there's also, just like in the ark when Noah crossed the waters, the animals were in the ark. Here, there's also this mention of what we call the mixed multitude and the animals. So there's a sense in which they're not repeating the totalitarian problem. That is, there's a room for the stranger to a certain extent. And you'll see after that, the rules, the laws will talk about how you are now going to engage with the stranger. And in the laws that the Torah will give, you always have to leave the corners of the field. There's a sense in which we don't want to reproduce this totalitarian world in which is all work, no rest, no strange. Everything is just potential for our identity. And so this
some play in the system.
yeah, and so this mention of the mixed multitude that left with Israel and the animals is to I think just to emphasize that.
Sure. So that's a diversity statement.
We'll have to do with that. We'll have to do with the strangers. We'll see.
It's a genuine diversity statement.
Yeah.
Is that even though there has to be a central order, there has to be room in that order for, well, what would you say? For the unavoidably exceptional or
Yes, right,
something like that.
Yeah.
And
And
the strategic,
Right.
why strategic?
Well, because different ideas and people are strategic in, it's the opposite of incest, right? So from a genetic perspective, from the notion of new ideas and thoughts, and that's one of the a classic.
Right, so it's actually, so once you get in order, to have that, that's a yin and yang balance.
That's right. Is to prevent stagnation and to prevent ossification. Is you need new ideas. You need new ground truth.
So as we see later on, where they kind of distinguish which laws apply to the people of Israel and the laws that apply to the stranger, there's integration and assimilation. But there's a clear distinction still always between the
So
two.
you'll see there's always warnings about something that's too far, right? Don't speak to the foreigner. Like it's too far because they'll bring their foreign gods in. And it's like, and also when you actually don't sleep with your sister, because it's like that's way too close. Like you have to find that powerful, optimized difference where you're able to integrate but also keep your identity at the same
And
time.
there'll be some strangers that are
My name is Alex. Message marked for deletion. New message. Please say yes or press message marked for deletion. New message. Please say yes or press message marked for deletion. New message. Please say yes or press message marked for deletion. New message. Please say yes or press main menu. To listen to your messages, press 1. To send a message, press 2. To create, press new message. Press the selection row. Message marked for deletion. New message. Press the selection row. Message marked for deletion. New message. I enter the people from home zone having something. Purple red, default page. Financial services company. You're having a great answer and I'm giving you a call. It's because he would like to go through the matrix and work on call as a financial consultant, third party reliever. If you have time, 125. Message marked for deletion. If wanted. Here, debrief the call power off outside. Going progress there. That's on the red. I will copy you love here. You call on it. Also, message marked for deletion. If wanted. This is the light grid.
That aren't admitted at all, like the Amalekite stage wrong, they're just, complete ban on that, yeah.
That's
So that just
the chair would be.
The word stranger, by the way, is literally resident non-Jew. That's what stranger is. In the Hebrew is ger, and ger means to reside. So it is the person who resides. That's why it says stranger and citizen. So that's the contradistinction. And so it's not just anybody. It's very specific to the non-Jew who lives among you. So just for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, because it's under enemy, because your enemy is also a stranger and he wants to attack you. Now there's someone among you, but that doesn't participate completely in your identity.
Right.
And St. Augustine has the word resident alien.
Yes, that's right.
I have that on my green card.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right, so that's a specific kind of category. Now, the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. That's the length of slavery, I suppose. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out for the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. That's the worship of the Spirit that brought them out of here. And that's a fundamental definition of whatever God is. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that is bought for money, and thou hast circumcised him, then he shall eat thereof. Now he's participating in that community.
And so all these rules are about this inside outside relationship. How do you manage this resident alien who's not one of you? How much does he participate? How much can't he participate? You can't eat during Passover, but here's how you're going to do it.
Right, so that's an attempt to clarify the borders, the conceptual borders, mostly the conceptual borders, but that would also be relevant to what constitutes the borders, period, because that's partly also how we define that
Well,
constitutes.
they can be within the geographic borders, but there still have to be conceptual borders between circumcised and uncircumcised.
The border is so important because that's the fundamental dispute between conservatives and liberals. Fundamentally, is how porous the border should be. And the reason that's a fundamental dispute is because we never have an answer to that. Well, sometimes the border should be really thick and solid so nothing gets in because everything's too dangerous, and sometimes it should be completely porous because you need new ideas because you're so tyrannical. And that varies always. And so part of the reason that the logos between conservatives and liberals is so important is that we're constantly adjudicating the porosity of the borders as a consequence of that dialogue. You can never come up with a fixed answer.
Right, what are the borders around gender? Right, it's everything is this negotiation.
I think part of the American stalemate is they don't discuss the key issue, which is citizenship.
Well, that's a border issue, and Trump was able to make much of that for that reason.
But the conservatives don't talk about citizenship. They talk about walls. The other side talks about open borders.
Yeah.
America could take in a huge number if they make them Americans.
Well, I think that's what's so helpful about this passage, that it understands that assimilation is challenging, it's difficult, but at the same time, one should be open to the stranger, open to the foreigner, we should be open to the possibility.
But they have to be incorporated within the structure through the rituals and the Okay. A foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house shall it be. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house. So that's a union within the house, right? So that's part of setting up this hierarchy of borders as well. Now you shall you. Thereof. All of the congregation of Israel shall keep it. That's like a definition. And when the stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. That is a symbol of his assimilation. And he shall be as one that is born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. Yeah, so that's the marker of belonging. And that's what that's.
And it actually also happens to be an external skin which is removed, like a garment of skin which is removed.
Right, but there's also something that allows the phallocentric phallus to shine forth in some real sense.
Yeah. Well, you gotta put blood in the deal, like it's not a easy thing to enter.
Right, yeah, that's right, that's right.
Yeah, he's trying to avoid that.
That's good, that's good. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Yeah, well, that's quite something. That's definitely a negotiation right there. That's how you can bring the stranger in. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies.
Wonderful sense of universality there. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger sojourneth among you.
Right, a nice mediation between exclusion and inclusion.
Yeah, what I was just saying, you might say this is the ways of the universality of the God of the Hebrews, which is so long a history of understanding of that universality, but that it's ultimately going to turn out to be there's a sense in which it is particular to the children of Israel, but the definition, the relation of the people to God is one that is universal. So I suppose this is going to turn out to be a revelation that is
Transcends the Israelites.
It transcends any particular people.
Exodus 13:1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever opened the womb among the children of Israel. So that's actually the child of what was virgin of Israel up to that point, in some real sense. Yeah.
By the way, since it's open to believe the Jewish law, I just find this interesting to include the Caesarean birth. The child of the firstborn of Caesarea is not considered the firstborn of their Jewish law.
Wow.
Because it didn't open
But they're ones in return of bath nonetheless, so there's some of it.
That's what they had in mind.
Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both in man and of beast, is mine. First and foremost belongs. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. So again, that is remember what transcends tyranny. That's the fundamental issue here. There shall be no leavened bread eaten. This day came you out in the month Abib. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites.
It means spring.
Means spring.
Yeah, the season spring.
So that's the creation motif again, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Well, spring is certainly
Is that the beginning of the Jewish liturgical year? Is that?
There are many new years actually.
Okay.
This is not Rosh Hashanah. That's in the fall. That's the one Jews celebrate. But this is a new year. Yeah, new beginning.
beginning of new life.
Right.
Okay. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey. So we're specifying the destination again. That thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the seventh day shall be a feast to the Lord. unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. Well, if you're a child and you see your parents doing something, especially if they repeat it, then you presume automatically that it's important.
And notice,
And knows.
not them.
And it's super interesting what Greg was saying in terms of the manner in which the narrative is set up, is that before the narrative happens, they're like, this is the ritual on which the narrative is based. Then there's the story, and then they're like, okay, now here's the ritual again. Like it's like repeating now the same ritual.
Well, the insistence is that they have to act this out. That's right. Right. It has to be acted out and not merely told or merely represented.
No, I think it's also it's a kind of hinge to the next chapter. I don't want to jump ahead, but I think it joins together the Passover and that moment of liberation, and then the ultimate, the second phase of liberation, because they're not out yet.
Well, you see in the Sermon on the Mount, when Christ talks about going forward to teach the Word of God, he insists that you act first and do and then teach. And so the action is seen as primary in that abstracted re-representation of the law and the prophets. It's still the emphasis there that action is the crucial issue here.
Well, that's also like clean up your room before you criticize the world, right? What's interesting about I'm classically referring to as a prompt, but the prompt of the unleavened bread appears when they have plenty of time for it to rise. I mean, that's another thing that's really interesting. Like everyone could have had a nice, yeasty dish, right? But it's almost like the prompt is this dropped handkerchief, right? Because moving forward, there doesn't really have to be time. And so it's very interesting because it appears before, it's another part of this like pre-establishing of what the rules of what the necessity, what the tools and the matter of the narrative, right, that they'll exist before it happens.
Well, there's this drop everything and follow God motif too. And that's echoed continually in the Gospels as well, that idea that no matter what's happening and no matter who you're beholden to, even if it's your own fortune in some sense, that when the Spirit calls, you're to drop everything and attend to that 100%. And of course, how else would you escape from tyranny if you didn't do that? Because it's not like you're going to have all the opportunity in the world, so to speak.
I often be puzzled by this sort of strange paradox that Exodus is often lifted up as this great manifesto for emancipation and political liberation down the centuries. Obviously, you talked about this in an earlier session, didn't you? In the 1660s in England and the civil rights movement and United States. But it's strange, almost immediately, or even before they're out, there's a contemplation that there's this sort of prefiguring or a declaration that liberation will be followed immediately by conquest, by a new land of beginning that is effectively going to involve conflict, is going to involve kind of terror, is going to involve in many ways that the reverse was about to be brought about. So
I would say to some degree, when you escape from a single tyranny, psychologically, you're immediately exposing yourself to a war of competing principalities. And that's illustrated to some degree in the attraction of the Israelites towards idolatry. So, rather than tyranny, it's one thing, so now you're into the land of potential and multiplicity, and then you're subject to the warring of competing requirements. And so there isn't any movement from tyranny through the desert into the promised land without subjugation to the war of competing principalities. That's part of the reason that people also become nostalgic for the tyranny. It's like, oh my God, I'm free. Man, this is complicated. And it's complicated because many things are pulling on you, right? And so you think, well, I'm free now. It's like, yeah, you're free to have 1,000 devils plague you instead of one tyrant. And part of it, I'm sorry, no, I can't. Well,
Agent One is so much more than pizza. In one single scoop, Agent One is daily multiplied pizza, critical habits, stress appetites, index, cravings. It's Agent One. Get yours today.
Are you still wearing enough layers to insulate Alaska? That's why you need the new increased bear skin. This is expanded bear skin include that black skin fragrance for incredible comfort. The fact that you did that across the board, the leg of the bear skin hoodie instead of the regular hoodies. Why? Because sure, your average fleece hoodie provides decent insulation. This
So I think so much about, right, in this day and age too, like what balance is, what moderation, what freedom feels like is somehow standing out on your own and being torn in 360 degrees equally. That's what freedom is now. And it's so easy to try and move it as a counter.
The multiplicity of identities, and so that beckons this freedom. Well, now you can be anything you want. It's like, oh my God.
But
Anything
right,
I want?
but part of that is you pull into the cover of one thing or another. But I think if you're truly standing on your own in a culture that doesn't remotely reward that, you're torn equally, right? So freedom's painful in some regards.
We go back to the dilemma, you've got to serve somebody.
Right.
Whereas the modern autonomy, you serve no one.
That's why you need the guardrails.
Only come themselves.
You need the guardrails, the rituals, the ceremonies.
Well, that's why children need that
The
predictability, or they just wear themselves to a frazzle, they misbehave, there's just no peace in a house where there's not repetition and ritual.
But to go back to James's saying, isn't Israel unique? Most nations conquer land and then figure out their laws. And the people are formed before they get to the land, and that's part of it. In other words, there are three, if I understand Dennis right, three great moments. One, for just liberation. Second, the covenant. And third, the tent of meeting. And when all those three are in place, there are people ready to go to their land. But that's very unusual. There are people formed before they get there.
Well, it begs a question too, doesn't it? Because one of the things, there's a lurking question here, is it's like, well, sure, the Israelites have just been freed from the tyranny of Egypt, and that's all great, but it doesn't look like it's all that good for the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Canaanites. And so, so this is being, our attention is being drawn to this repeatedly. It's like, well, what gives the Israelites the right to be going in there and taking the promised land from its current inhabitants? So we definitely come to that.
To go back to Genesis 15 for that sort of thing.
And it showed me a sign for
Forgive me, what is the Genesis 15 answer?
The Lord says, you will not get the land until the iniquity.
Well, I know, I was gonna cite that, but I didn't remember it was Genesis. That's why.
The Lord says, you will get the land until the wickedness of the people in the land is full. So you get the idea.
Oh, so you couldn't conquer them.
Yes, that's
You
right.
can conquer them.
And constantly, you're not getting this because you're better than others or better than others. God says this to the Israelites constantly. But they're really awful, and therefore there is a moral justification.
So the providential flip side.
That's a tough one. And it showed me for a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt keep therefore this ordinance in his season, from year to year. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore unto thee, and to thy fathers, and shall give it thee, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix. So the first thing also that emerges out of the potential is to open the matrix. Is the first thing that emerges out of it. The first thing is anomalous and special and unique because it's the first thing that emerges. So there's also that being emphasized there too. So
In the pagan nations, the firstborn was a matter of incredible male pride. And it's almost hitting it on the head. The firstborn here, they can dedicate.
yeah, well, you see this specialness of firstborns in families too, because well, it's the first child, and so that's even more remarkable than the next child in some sense, because you've already had a child then, and you know, not that you love the second child any less, but that bloom of revelation That's it, in some sense, the bloom of revelation is off the second child.
Well, because when you have a child and you cross the threshold of being a parent, your entire world and the universe is renewed.
Right.
But you look at Genesis, it's very often the second child whom the Lord favors.
Absolutely, well, because you have this tension too.
Abel,
Right.
Jacob, Joseph,
That's right.
Moses.
But it's,
Do you suppose that occurs when the firstborn isn't properly consecrated to God? So the firstborn is often an icon of tyranny because he's privileged, because he's the firstborn. He can easily fall into an alliance with tradition. Because look at me, tradition favors me, therefore tradition is right. And it's then when the second son becomes favored.
Well, that's also, I think that's Apollarian too, right? I mean, it's like the first child fulfills the role in the family, and it's like, well, what role's next? Who you're born next, right? It has to be something innovative or revolutionary. We don't have a revolutionary first child like you would with Moses.
Yeah, well, there's some evidence for that in the research literature that firstborns tend to be more conservative.
There's also the idea of pride, like in the kind of mythological image of like the devil falling from heaven, you have a sense, you have these images where it says things like, there's a jewel on his forehead, like this images of the highest angel falling. And so there's a notion also that the sin of the first, and the danger of the first, is pride. Right. So even St. Peter, Christ says, it's like, you're the foundation, and then get behind me, Satan.
And every first thing of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb. And if thou wilt not redeem it, that's a substitutionary sacrifice. Yeah. Then thou shalt break its neck. So you have to give it up. And all the firstborn of men among thy children shalt thou redeem. You have to make a sacrifice. And it shall be when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, what is this? That thou shalt say unto him, by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, from the house of bondage. I guess a sacrifice like that too. That is definitely something children would remember. As a sacrifice that involves blood and death is not something that you easily forget. So it marks the importance. You put something to death or something, definitely marks its importance. And modern people can barely understand that because we're so abstracted away from death. And not that that's always such a bad thing, but and it shall be that when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, what is this? That thou shalt say unto him, by strength of hand the Lord brought us up from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrificed to the Lord all that opened the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem.
And I think it's important, at least for me, this passage is very important because in the days, preceding days, I tried to say that there's this clear link between the death of the Egyptians and the sacrifice of the firstborn. And I think this passage shows it very clearly. It says, when your children ask you, say, God killed the firstborn of the Egyptians, now therefore you sacrifice your firstborn and you redeem them. But there's a relationship between the text.
And you redeem them with a substitutionary sacrifice.
And I think that has to do with this idea that if you voluntarily give up, then God will let the world exist. God, that's how the world exists. And so God gives it back to you.
There's I wanted to say something about sacrifice, because there's this sense that you can read this as if, I don't know, God is taking away something is yours. My wife and I had an experience, so I shared in a personal story recently, long lines. Children are now blessed with children and getting beyond the childbearing years. And anyway, suddenly my wife became pregnant and test and then another test and went to the doctor and still, indeed, there it was. It's a miracle. Next week, an ultrasound, there's a heartbeat. And it seemed just this miracle. And actually, the heartbeat was gone. There was no, what that life that had been was gone. It was very sad for us. But I was just still thinking about this. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. We have no right to children. Children are a gift. We have no right into our own lives in a way. Even our own lives are a gift. And so there's no sort of sacrifice. Really, it's just giving back what you were given.
already. It's not as though you make a deal with God in some way that you give him what was yours, a little bit of it, or the best. No. You're only giving back to God what was God's.
Absolutely. I want to say something here. I've been trying to avoid too much, let's say, doing the Christian parallel, but I think because Passover for the Christians is extremely important. Pascha is the main feast of the Christian church. And I'd like to just point to how Christians have brought this into their story, both in a very different way, but in ways that are connected directly to the story. And so on Passover, Christ offers the bread and the blood. The bread and the blood of the Passover on the doors of the lintel become the wine that Christ offers as his blood, and the bread that Christ offers as well. And the difference is that in the Passover of the Christians, there's only one firstborn that dies, right? And that is Christ. And that is very strange because he is the sacrifice. He offers the bread and the blood as the Passover sacrifice. And then when the Spirit passes, he is the only one who dies. And so that is the manner in which we understand the finality, let's say, of the Passover sacrifice as being that. So he is both the redemption, the protection, and the firstborn in a very strange way, almost as the Egyptian child that gets taken, but also as the self-offering, because he is killed by the stranger. He's also the Israelite thrown into the river. He's all those things kind of captured together because he's killed by the Romans, right? The Romans are in the story of Jesus at the time of Jesus, like the Egyptians. And so he's both self-offered, but also killed. He is the one who protects on the door, but it's also the redemption sacrifice for all of us. And so all the symbolism like crashes together in ways that it's hard sometimes to fully account for. Like even now, I know that I'm missing elements because it just seems.
Well, it is. At minimum, speaking secularly, it's a centralizing narrative, right? It's an attempt by the narrative imagination to bring all the elements of historical narrative into one sort of place, whatever that means, and God only knows what that means. And it came to pass when Pharaoh would hardly let us go that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that opened the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thine hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes. I do not know what that means.
That's tefillin in Jewish history. That's the boxes that you see in religious Jews when they pray, the black box on the forehead and the black box on the arm. They contain a portion of the Torah on parchment in those boxes. There were two examples of this. This is called tefillin. In English, it's phylacteries. I never met any who knew what phylacteries was, who didn't know what tefillin was. So it's a useless translation. But that's what it is. It's those boxes.
So this is another example to remember.
Yes, but the proof that it's physical, because some Jews think it is metaphorical, and many Christians are thinking it is metaphorical. Christians don't. It's film, obviously. It took me a while to realize, and you don't know this until you're in Deuteronomy, it follows the law of the mezuzah, what you put on the doorpost, which is also a parchment of the Torah. So there is a mezuzah on your body and a mezuzah on your doorpost. This is the mezuzah on your body.
So this is an instruction to remember. So then you might think, well, you're remembering here the spirit that brought you out of tyranny. When we're enjoined upon to never forget the Holocaust, are we enjoined to never forget the Holocaust, or are we enjoined to never forget the spirit, the nature of the spirit that overcame the Nazis? Like, what's the proper remembering there?
That's it. My answer will disappoint you, but I think it's to remember the horror. Because we don't want to, it's really remember the 6 million.
I know that's how it's construed.
That's how it's construed. Well, there's
Right,
no
but then
obvious
the trouble is
law.
you're stuck in the atrocity of the past then, that's the, and I'm wondering, is that the proper remembering in the biblical sense? Because what you're told here It's a real sense.
I'll take you out.
That's right.
It's a good question.
Remember the spirit of that which took you out. You know,
Well, I guess Jews aren't quite prepared yet, maybe over the course of generations, to say God took the Jews out of Hitler's Europe. It's hard to say given the staggering number of war.
right, well, I think it's a mistake not to, it's also a mistake not to remember the horror, because you also want to appreciate the depths of the tyranny.
Right.
And then if something can overcome even that, what must it be?
I think we should remember both. You've affected this too. That's a very powerful point.
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time studying the Holocaust, and what I learned from it wasn't the mystery. Although I learned that, it was that something overcame the mystery.
And what was it that overcame this?
Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out, Dennis. Really? I mean, really, that's what we're all trying to figure out. Well, the whole injunction was remember, so it doesn't happen again. Okay, remember what? Remember the misery? Or